also had a few of these Sundays where I've just kind of called them interludes, where we kind of hit pause in the midst of Revelation. We kind of do a little different look at something in the book of Revelation. And we just call them interludes. Before Spotify and Apple Music, you had these things called albums. You would buy a whole album, okay? It was vinyl, it was a CD. Anybody remember CDs? And so you buy a whole album, and on certain like albums, like usually hip hop and rap, they would have an interlude track, right? So Jay-Z's public service announcement, okay, was an interlude. Parachutes by Coldplay, that was an interlude. These tracks that in the middle of the album, they're meant to attune our ears to something, to recalibrate the listener to something, right? There was a beat they wanted you to hear. There was a feeling they wanted you to feel before you moved on in the album. And so what's happened throughout Revelation, especially in the 7 letters that Jesus is writing to the 7 churches, every time he'll say, hey, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. It's an interlude. I want you to hear this. You need to be able to hear something. And so this morning, we're gonna have our Easter interlude. The Spirit wants us to hear something from Revelation 21. We're gonna take a survey of Revelation 21, just a flyover. We're gonna look at it more in depth in October, November, whenever we kind of get there. But for now, we just wanna tune our hearts to something from Revelation. If we could see the end of all things, like if we could see the end of all things, if our hearts could hear the future hope of all things, I just wonder what it would do for us right now. Right? Like if this future glory of all things could echo in your soul, what might that do for your anxiety? If this future glory of all things could echo in your soul, what that might do for your sense of justice, for your fears, for your depression, for the choices you're having to make right now, for this sense of meaning and purpose and identity that we're looking for, a future glory of all things, if it could echo and we could hear it, what might that do? And so this is an interlude that tunes our ears to hear what the future glory is. Now, I know some of you are here because it's Easter and you're skeptical about Christianity and the Bible. You're not even sure about what you think about this and then Jesus and then the resurrection is a whole nother thing. It's like, are we still believing that a God-man, rose from the dead? Is that really what church is still about? I thought this was 2020. We're in the 21st century. Like, is that what we're still doing? And the answer is yes, okay? That is what we're still doing. And this just isn't the sermon where I give you all the facts about the resurrection and try to prove to you the historic cosmic reality of the literal, actual bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's not the sermon today. I don't have time for that. I'm gonna do something else, okay? I'm gonna do something else. I don't have time to talk about those things, like the women who would find Jesus's empty tomb. If you were to make up a story in that day, you wouldn't have said that women found the empty tomb because they couldn't testify in court in that kind of culture. So you wouldn't make it up, okay? But I'm not gonna take the time to talk about that. I'm not gonna talk about the over 500 people that Jesus saw. The risen Jesus saw 500 people at one time. He didn't fool just a couple fools. It was 500 people that he appeared to, and I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm not gonna talk about how the Jewish leaders could have just produced Jesus's body, right? To squelch this revolutionary uprising, based on a fanciful claim of a resurrection. They could have just said, here's his body, unless they couldn't because his body wasn't there, Don't have time for that. I'm not going to talk about how certainly, like people would be willing to die for something they believe in. Absolutely, that's happened across history. But nobody dies for something they know not to be true. Nobody dies for a lie. And yes, yet 11 out of the 12 apostles were all martyred because they claimed Jesus raised from the dead, right? So I'm not gonna take the time to talk about those kind of facts about the actual resurrection, okay? Because I don't think your problem actually is intellectual. I think it's actually indifference. That your problem with Christianity and Jesus, and by the way, that's not your fault, that's actually ours. This is my fault. This is pastor's fault, church leaders. This is the church's fault because we have given you an unimaginative, boring Christianity. And we've told you that God is just God to help you, and God is just God to help you right now, and he can make your life a little bit better. And so let us give you some tips for how God can make your life better, and it's boring, and it lacks rhythm and soul, and it's small, and yet Jesus is so huge. Jesus is huge, and your future is certain, and God's vision for the world is beautiful and holy, and if you would just get a glimpse of it, if you could get a taste of what is to come, you would at the least want it to be true. Like you would at least hope that Christianity is true. If you could see this future hope. N.T. Wright, he says this, I just find this helpful. He says, Jesus' resurrection is the beginning of God's new project, not to snatch people away from earth to heaven, but to colonize earth with the life of heaven. What you do with your body in the present matters because God has a great future in store for it. What you do in the present by painting, preaching, singing, sewing, praying, teaching, building hospitals, digging wells, campaigning for justice, writing poems, caring for the needy, loving your neighbor as yourself, it will last into God's future. These activities are not simply ways of making this present life a little less beastly, a little more bearable. They are a part of what we may call building for God's kingdom. And so maybe you don't believe that this is true yet, Jesus, the resurrection, Christianity, but would you hope that it's true? Would you hope that this story was true? And so let this interlude from Revelation 21 tune your heart to the rhythm of what God is doing in the world. And so 5 things that the resurrection means, okay? 5 things. Here's the first. The resurrection means heaven is coming to earth, okay? So verse 1 again. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Verse 2, and I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven. Okay, so this is something you have to wrap your mind around. The end game of this story is that heaven comes down. Amen. Right? This thing doesn't end with you in heaven. This thing ends with heaven on earth, literally heaven on earth. And this is the whole message of the Bible. For some reason, we got it mixed up and we're all trying to get to heaven, which is great. Like get there, but you're just there for a little bit, okay? It doesn't end there. Every other religion and philosophy is man trying to reach heaven, not Christianity, okay? So whatever your heaven is, it could be the American dream, it could be enlightenment, it could be nirvana, it could be heaven. Every other religion, every other philosophy or way of life teaches that humanity has to work to get there. You are trying to get to heaven. The gospel of Jesus Christ is a paradox, and okay, we're not a cult, okay? The gospel is heaven comes down. Amen. That heaven comes down, okay? And so this is the message of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, from the prophets to Jesus to the apostles, is that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, God is restoring, renewing, and redeeming all things and making heaven on earth. If you had this picture of heaven, like playing a harp in a diaper, that's not heaven. That sounds like hell, actually. I mean, that literally, think about it. You in a diaper playing a harp. That just sounds terrible. Right, cuz? Coleman almost fell off the chair, bro. Look at verse 2 again. This is just a different perspective. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So this is the church, okay? And we're gonna talk about the church here in a second, but try to get the imagery here. Heaven is city, heaven is the church, heaven is coming down on this new restored, renewed earth. But here's the imagery. It's like a bride, right? Like a bride adorned for her husband. I'm sure you do this whenever I do weddings. You got the bride, she's gonna start coming down the aisle, and she's wearing white, she looks beautiful, and you look at the bride, right? Because everybody stands and looks at the bride, but everybody also peeks at who, right? The groom. Is he here? He's here. Yeah, he's here. So the groom's here, and we're all looking at her, but we're looking at him too, because we wanna know how is he responding to her. Because if he's playing it cool, I'm concerned, If he's trying to play it cool, then I'm worried about this relationship, okay? Don't play it cool. I'll punish your coverage, man. You smile, you laugh, you cry. She's way too beautiful for you, okay? I'll whisper, I'll tell him if he ain't, And so he's smiling and he's crying. He can't believe he's watching his beautiful bride come down the aisle. I remember my wedding. My bride was coming down the aisle, and it was Andrea Bocelli's song, right? Italian. Ray was singing in Spanish here, wasn't that beautiful? And so this is Andrea, just all in Italian. He could have been singing about canola. I have no idea what he was singing about. And it was just beautiful, and she's coming down the aisle, and the Bible's saying heaven's gonna be like that. It's gonna be the church, this bride, this city, coming down from heaven, adorned for her husband. The Bible is saying that's what it's gonna be like. And so take all of this, okay? Take all of this together. The Bible starts in Genesis. God creates the heavens and the earth, the skies and the earth. So the story of the Bible starts here. But then the Bible ends in Revelation, and God is creating new heavens and new earth, and the story ends here. The story starts on earth and here, and it ends here as well. Right? Meaning the resurrection of Jesus, it means that the physical world matters. That Jesus literally rose bodily from the grave. Right? He makes a big deal of letting people touch him after the resurrection. Right? Touch my hands, and he has breakfast tacos with Peter and some of the boys on the beach, right? He's eating like it's not falling through. I'm not a ghost, right? It's just he's eating, he's touching, and all of this, because this will blow your mind. Think about this. Right now, Jesus is in a body, ruling and reigning over all things. The body matters. Matter matters. The story the Bible is telling is about Jesus' resurrection, beginning a new creation right here in the midst of this one, right? So then you've got heaven on earth. You've got this organic, earthy gospel now, right? God's getting his hands dirty. Everything is sacred. There's no sacred secular divide. Your work matters. What you do matters. What you make matters. In verses 24 and 26, you've got the kings of the earth bringing their glory and honor into the city. Most theologians say that there's an aspect of our work in that our work and worship, our culture making, our artifacts, we're bringing them into the new heavens and new earth. And it's our technology and our art and our music and our business. It's all that we do, and it gets perfected and restored and renewed. And there's this continuity between the old earth and the new earth, between the old world and this new world. And so we could spend the rest of our time thinking about the implications of this, that this world matters and the body matters and matter matters. But let me just give you a few things to consider. What might this mean in regards to the body for body image issues? What might this mean for our sexuality? What might this mean for body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia, right? The body matters. God cares about your body. Listen, this is so important. God has an eternal vision for your body. An eternal vision for your body. What healing might he want to bring? Think about that, like your sicknesses and chronic illness, and like we believe that God still heals. He cares about the body. The goal isn't just to get out of this body and get out of here. That's not the goal. The goal is for heaven to come down. And so it's a divine certainty that you will be healed. One day, you will be healed. One day, your body will be made whole. What if he wants to give you a taste of that even now? Right? If he can raise the dead, you think your thing is hard for him? Yeah, of course he can heal. He might heal today. The physical world matters. How we steward creation matters. Our longing and desire for beauty, that's a godly thing. That's worship. Enjoying creation is part of our worship. The resurrection means heaven is coming down. All right? Second thing. The resurrection means God will heal holistically. Okay? God will heal completely, holistically. Look at verse 1 again. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. It doesn't mean there's no ocean in the new earth, okay? That would be terrible. Oceans are great. Okay, does mean that there's no Texas lakes, okay? Texas lakes are not real. We made them, okay? God didn't make them. They're going away, passing away into the lake of fire, right? It's a lake of fire. Texas, they're literally lakes of fire. They're terrible. It doesn't mean that there's no sea. Sea, throughout the Bible, especially in the Old Testament and the Old Testament prophets, is symbolic for evil. Okay, so there's no evil in the new heaven, new earth. Okay, verse 4, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. There's no mourning, there's no crying, there's no pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Try to just imagine a world like that. No lament is necessary. No mourning is necessary. There's no suffering at all. Like, try to imagine a world, if we could even conceive of this, with no rejection and no loneliness and no betrayal and no pain. That kind of like thing that happens to your stomach, like that pit, that like angst, never again would you feel that. Never again would you experience that. Never again. He will wipe away every tear. There's good tears, there's happy tears. It doesn't mean we're not gonna ever cry in heaven. It also doesn't mean, I don't think, that we won't remember things. We won't remember the hard things that we had gone through. I don't think it means that at all. I think what it means is that God is comforting us completely. You know how like sometimes the lingering effects of past suffering are still with you? Maybe you're for the most part over it, like you're not consumed by it, but every once in a while something happens and it triggers like this response, this remembrance, this kind of memory in your soul of past hurt or past struggle or past. And I think what's happening here is God's comforting all of that, right? C.S. Lewis, he says, everything sad comes untrue. Past suffering won't haunt you. Past affliction won't paralyze you. Past hurt won't ever affect you anymore. And death shall be no more. Can you imagine a world without death? Right? Why? Like, why is death no more? Well, because of the resurrection. Jesus conquered death. Jesus conquered sin, which is what leads to death, right? So everything about us that is broken gets put back together. This is physical healing, emotional healing. This is relational healing. In fact, one of the first things that the risen Jesus does after he's resurrected is he reconciles his relationship with Peter. Right? So he's having the fish tacos on the beach with them, and he's reconciling the relationship after Jesus denied him 3 times. That the resurrection means holistic healing, even relational healing, right? That broken relationship with your dad will somehow be reconciled. That betrayal will somehow be restored. In the next chapter, in chapter 22, it talks about the healing of the nations. Here in 21, verse 24, it talks about the nations are walking together by the light of the glory of God. Even relationships will be healed. Michael Gorman, he says this. He says, God's eschatological reality, his end times reality, is ultimately about reconciliation among peoples, the healing of the nations, not just individual salvation. This corporate reconciliation takes place when people from every tribe and tongue and nation center their lives on God and the Lamb. You want to see reconciliation among nations, among cultures, among races? Center your life, center your worship on the Lamb, and that's what we are, reconciled in him. Revelation is like the rest of the Bible about the creation of a people living in harmony with God, one another, and the entire creation. The resurrection means God heals holistically. No more physical pain, no more emotional trauma, no more relational strife, only shalom, right? Only wholeness and peace. That's what I'm talking about right there, right? This is the resurrection, okay? You with me? Third one. You want the good news or the bad news here? I heard good news. Somebody say good news? Okay. Okay, here's the good news. The good news is that God will make everything right and justice will win. Okay? The bad news is that without Jesus, God's just judgments are coming for you. The resurrection means that justice and judgment are certain. Okay, so hang with me. First, look at verse 3. And I heard a loud voice. Where's this voice coming from? From the throne, right? Try to imagine the throne. Revelation is all about imagery, and the predominant image in Revelation is the throne. How many times? 47 times in Revelation, the throne shows up. And everything is coming from the throne. All things are being decreed and orchestrated from the throne. And then all of our praise and everything is going up to the throne. But the throne is central. Right? The throne is the image of Revelation. And the throne, it's an image of authority, right? Jesus rules, he decrees, he reigns from the throne. And so because there's a good king on the throne, justice and judgment are certain, okay? Verse 4 again, there's no suffering when Jesus brings his kingdom in its fullness because he is the good king. He has right justice. And so there's no suffering. Back in verse 25, chapter 21, verse 25, the gates are always open. It's never night. That doesn't mean it's never night. We like sunsets. We like the night. It just means that it's safe there all the time. Nobody has to lock their doors. It's perfect justice. That Jesus, he right now rules from his throne, which means like in this life, right now, that should matter to us. He is our vindication. He is our defender. We don't need revenge. We don't hold on to bitterness. We can actually forgive because we are entrusting right justice to the right king. Yeah, Christians should be the least judgmental people on the earth because we know God has our back. We should be the least judgmental people. God is our defender. Jesus is on the, what are we worried about? And this means then that anything that is at odds with God's coming new creation, the church should speak prophetically against. That we should be able to say something about what is not right about the world as we see it in contrast with the world to come. Right? We have a better story to tell. We have a better way. We are the resistance. We are the revolution that's happening. We've been given a vision of what will be, and so we should speak about anything that would contrast that. Not arrogantly. It's not ours. We didn't do anything. We're part of the problem. But humbly, we speak to this future hope that was achieved by love, and we do it in love, and we resist anything that opposes this future glory. That's justice. Practice justice in the city. It's because you see something that shouldn't be, and it won't be in the new heavens and new earth. So we speak up about it. But here's the problem, verse 8. Verse 8, this is the problem. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire. Here's the problem. Did anyone get out of that list clean? And don't lie about it because that's on the list. I'm not a sorcerer, pastor. Okay. All the other ones you are, though. Yeah, the problem is we don't get out of this list clean. That's why we need Jesus. Amen. Right? It's why in verse 6, we need to be thirsty. We are the people that would hunger and thirst for righteousness. Christians should be, the church should be the people that recognize that they are the sinners. We're the ones that recognize we need a Savior. Amen. Now, you're not supposed to talk about hell on Easter. It's like in the pastor's handbook. It's too offensive. And yet, here it is in this text, okay? And I want to be faithful to that. And so let's just chat for a moment. If heaven on earth, right, if heaven is coming to earth, if the resurrection means heaven is coming to earth, and that's going to be a place of no suffering, right? No suffering, just beauty and joy and peace. If that's true, if that's going to be a place of no suffering, how can you and I be there since we have caused so much suffering? How do we not mess it up? Oh, Siri's going to tell us. Siri was going to tell us. The Times in Britain back in the day, they once posed the question in an article, what's wrong with the world? And the great Christian philosopher, G.K. Chesterton, he wrote a 2-word response, I am. We need a resurrection too. We need a Savior. We need to be changed, right? We are the church. We're the city, right? The bride that comes down from heaven to a restored earth. And we only get heaven on earth if we're a part of Jesus' bride. And so we have to drink deep from the free waters of his grace. That's how we get in. We're no better than anybody else. We get in because we thirst and we hunger for grace. You need Jesus. I need Jesus. Why? Because justice and judgment are certain. Amen. Fourth, the resurrection means that the church is forever. Look at verse 9. The church is forever. Then came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues. And he spoke to me saying, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. I love that. We're the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance. We're reflecting the radiance of God. Like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. This is all imagery. Think about it, imagine it, feel it. It had a great high wall with 12 gates. And at the gates, 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. Right? 3 gates to the east and north and south and west. Verse 14, the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were 12 names, the 12 apostles. Verse 15, and the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. I love verse 16. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width, and he measured the city with its rod, 12,000 stadia. That's huge, by the way. Its length and width and height are equal. No, verse 17 is one I love. He also measured its wall 144 cubits by human measurement, and just in case you're wondering, which is also an angel's measurement. This is funny. Verse 18, the wall was built of jasper while the city was pure gold, like clear glass, right? The foundations of the wall of the city are adorned with all these different jewels. Jump down to verse 21. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. So people ask, like, do we take that literally? Do we take that literally? Yes. Yes, you take it symbolically literal. You take it figuratively literal. It's representing something. It can't be literally literal because it just described a cubed city, okay? So length, width, but also height. It's a cube, okay? We're like in a glass house, is that? No. And streets of gold, but the gold you can see through? So it's like, wow, like what is, that doesn't even make any sense. Okay, so this is all symbolic. This is all pictures of what is happening in the new heavens, in the new earth, in this new city that is a church, right? It's a church. And so here, this is a picture of the church. Let me read to you Ephesians 5. Tell me if this sounds like maybe what John is trying to describe. Ephesians 5 says this, Christ loved the church, and he gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself. What's the word? In what? Splendor. Without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. That's the picture that John is trying to paint for us in Revelation 21 of the church. That's us in splendor. Now, the church doesn't look like that right now. The church, like many of you have been hurt by the church, right? Betrayed, neglected, abused, abandoned. We have a term for it now, church hurt. And it's always been that way. The term feels new, the phrase feels new, maybe the conversations feel new, but it's always been that way. The church is full of sinners and sinners sin, and so we hurt each other. Paradox Church, are we not broken? Yeah. Sinful, hypocritical, hard-hearted, stubborn, self-righteous sometimes? Right? Say it for our friends and family in the back. Yes. But this is what we will look like. This is what Jesus is doing in us. It's so important to see a vision of what we'll be, right? What we will be, so that we can then recognize when we're not that. Yeah. All the jewels, these are the jewels that the priests would wear on their garments in the Old Testament. And so what it's saying is that we're the priests in this temple. The temple is the city. God's gonna dwell with us, and we're the priests of this temple. And so we're in a sense like ushering, right now, we're ushering people to God. And we're bringing God to the people. We're doing the priestly work of the temple. And so this new life that we have in the resurrection of Jesus right now is part of God bringing this temple and this heaven to earth. And so it's one of holiness. And holiness is not a boring piety. Holiness then is the pure love and service to people. It's the priestly work. Our hands are clean because we're in a sacred place. There's a purity, there's a holiness to it all as we love and serve people that they might meet God. That they will know that we are his disciples if we love one another. The point of this picture is that the church is beautiful and the church is forever. Right? Like I've just always been astounded by this. The Roman kingdom was, ruled the world for 1,200 years, but then it fell. America, we've been a world leader for 100 or so years. One day we will fall. Your marriage is an institution. It will last, if you're lucky, 70 years, but one day it will end. The church of Christ is the only thing that's forever. We, as a people, as brothers and sisters, are the only thing that lasts forever. And then finally, lastly, the resurrection means, and I didn't know how else to say it, Jesus is everything. Right, the resurrection means Jesus is everything. Look at verse 22. Verse 22 says, and I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. I love that. Right, so the temple was the place where you would meet God, okay? That's where you meet God. And so the Bible here is saying, what John is saying in this vision is that the temple, there's no temple there because the Lamb is there, right? Jesus is there and he is then the temple. Back in verse 3, Jesus said from the throne, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. So you don't have this the temple was like this sliver of heaven on earth. You would go into the temple and you would meet with God, and that's where God was, right? And so you kind of get a taste of heaven right there on earth, right? Heaven comes to earth right there in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, to be more specific. But then Jesus here is saying, like the Lamb is saying, that what John is saying is that this future vision is that the Lamb is the temple. And so to meet with God, we go and we meet with Jesus who's dwelling with his people. Right? He's just right there, right? He's here, he's among us. What we know spiritually is true in Revelation, that he stands in the midst of the churches, we will know is actually physically true in the new heavens and new earth. The Lamb is the temple. The king who rules from the throne is a lamb. That's a paradox. The lion is a lamb. That's a paradox. 27 times in Revelation, we have this picture of the lamb. I'll give you a couple examples. Chapter 5, verse 5. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, Jesus, has conquered. And between the throne and the four living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain. Or Revelation 7, for the Lamb is in the midst of the throne, and he will be their shepherd. And he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Or chapter 17, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And those with him are called and chosen and faithful. Right here in chapter 21, verse 9, the church is the wife of the Lamb. Verse 22, the Lamb is the temple of the city. Verse 23, there's no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God gives light, and the light is the lamp of the Lamb. Right, so Jesus is this temple. He's present with his people, and it's as if there's no need of sun or moon because his glory lights up the place. I grew up in Michigan, and if you had like a fresh snow at night, and it was like a full moon, the moon would reflect off the snow. You could drive without headlights at night. It was just this beautiful glow in the land. That's what this is saying, that the glory of God is this reflection of his beauty. The light of God, it's his holiness, his goodness, and it'll be so bright we don't even need the sun. Jesus is present, right? He's near, he's with his people. The risen Jesus is everything. It says that he is Alpha and Omega, meaning everything comes from him and everything goes to him. It says that he is the beginning. It's this Greek word that we get our word archetype, right? It means the originating source. He's the beginning. He's the uncaused cause of all things. He's the beginning and the end. It's the Greek word telos. It means literally the purpose of all things. Jesus is everything. From him and through him and to him are all things, right? Meaning, if you need help, look to Jesus. If you need healing, look to Jesus. If you need purpose, look to Jesus. You need hope, look to Jesus. If you need a savior, look to Jesus. If you need a king, look to Jesus. If you need freedom, look to Jesus. If you find yourself broken, look to Jesus. If you need justice, look to Jesus. If you're afraid, look to Jesus. If you're lost, look to Jesus. If you find yourself dead in a tomb, he knows the way out. Look to Jesus. Right, church, we have to live like we actually live in a world that a resurrection happened in. Right, we live in a world where a resurrection happened. And if you're not following Jesus, become a Christian and put your trust, look to Jesus. Amen. Romans 10:9, it says, if you're thirsty, and you see your need for him, you can buy springs of water without price. Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It's free. Heaven came down in the person of Jesus. We got a taste of him. We got a taste of the temple, right? This little sliver of heaven on earth. Wherever Jesus would go, he said, I'm the temple, I'm the temple. And wherever he would go, like heavenly things would happen. People would be healed. Demons were cast out. The dead would rise. Sinners were comforted. The future glory of all things is Jesus with us forever. God will dwell with his people on this place. This organic, real, tangible, physical place. And we get to walk with God. In Genesis, it says that God walked with him in the cool of the night. Can you imagine walking with Jesus? This is meant to give you an imagination, a hope, a glory, a picture of what should be and what will be, but only if you're in him. I just want to be really clear. These are promises only for the people of God, only for those that have been reconciled to God through Jesus, only those who are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Amen. And so let's stand in response. I want to pray over you. Father, I pray for my friends, pray for this church. God, that we would, by your grace, be this beautiful bride to the city, to our friends, our neighbors. Gosh, that we would, you'd just be making us more and more beautiful, that we would walk, we would live as a people who actually believe we're in a world where a resurrection happened. And I pray for my friends who just they don't know you. They haven't put their hope in you, their trust in you. They've not actually surrendered their life to you. They still have questions, they're still skeptical, and man, I understand that. Jesus, if you were to show yourself to them, if they would get a taste of your glory, if they would be able to see the waters of grace that you provide, how irresistible that would be. Would you give us all ears to hear? Would you tune our hearts to the rhythm and grace of all that you're doing here among us right now, this encounter, this moment with God, the living God. God, would you do your work? Amen.